Well, radiation is something that has a bad connotation. Many people are afraid of even the word radiation. Did you know that there's a kind of radiation that you just cannot live without? Yep, there really is. And that radiation, of course, comes from the sun. Now notice, when God had made our world and darkness was upon the face of the deep, He said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light that it was good. Something's happened to our world. A lot of people have fears. A lot of people have anxiety about even being outside in the sunlight. But we're going to show you the incredible blessings that await those who understand the truth. When man was created, he was created to live out of doors. The body, therefore, logically, must have the ability to receive benefit from the sun. It must be. If man was created to be outside, then the sunlight was bound to be a benefit. But yet today you see many people that are afraid, and all the skin cancers they say it causes and all these type of things. I hope both Jeanie and I will be able to share with you enough information that you won't fear the sun anymore. You'll know how to use it to your benefit. So, you take our planet Earth right here as it's seen, and there's the moon going around the Earth, around it, and space is moving. The sun is revolving round and round. That's not an actual good ratio between the sun and the Earth. I'll show you that in a little while. But what a distance, 149.6 million kilometers. At this average distance, light travels from the sun to the Earth in approximately 8 minutes and 19 seconds. That's very fast. That's 186,000 miles a second, isn't it? Used to be, yeah. That's quite a distance. But if you just take a look at the sun is not a solid object like Earth is. The sun is actually a plasma. And it has some very interesting aspects to it. You'll notice this is very interesting. And that is that the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere are going in a different direction than the center of the sun. How many knew that? It's going in a complete different direction. Wow. And something else interesting is that the days to rotate in the upper and lower hemispheres are 33.5 days, but the center, it rotates 25.6 days. So it's going faster than the two poles. Isn't that interesting? It's a plasma. And so you've heard of solar flares, haven't you? This is a picture of a solar flare on the surface of the sun. Whoever got close enough to take that, I don't know who they were. It was probably taken from a camera from space, way out in space, and then magnified. But I got that picture, and it's absolutely it's huge. I'm going to give you an idea of how big that solar flare is. We're going to take a look at approximate size of the Earth to a solar flare on the sun's surface. That looks pretty big, doesn't it? See that flame right down there? See if I can get my pointer going. Here we are. Yes, no, maybe so. Here it comes. Right down. Get over here, Ferrari. Come on. Right there. You see that? That flame. Take a look at something like over here in the Earth. There we are. That flame could wipe out that whole continent. That size, couldn't it? But that's not the ratio of the Earth to a solar flare. I'm going to show you the exact, well, not the exact, but it's really close to being pinpoint accurate. Watch this. There's how big the Earth is to that solar flare. That is a huge flame that could engulf more than the whole Earth. It's gone. How incredible is space? How incredible is the one who made space? And this is all just all these flames and just going and going and going. Wow, just incredible. The optical surface of the sun, that is the photosphere, is known to have a temperature of approximately 6,000 K, or 6,000 Kelvin, it's called, 6,000 Kelvin. Now, the upper extremity of it, above it lies the solar corona, rising to a temperature of approximately 1 million to 6,000 to 2,000 K. This is incredibly vast, these temperatures. To 2 million, yeah, pardon me, 2 million. 1 million to 2 million K. Really incredible things. And as light comes in from space and enters this wonderful little green planet, I call it, the blue planet with the green Earth, sunlight in the broad sense is the total frequency spectrum of electromagnetic radiation given off by the sun. On Earth, sunlight is filtered through the Earth's atmosphere, and solar radiation is observed as daylight when the sun is above the horizon. I'm giving you a lot of background on the sun because this is going to set up what it is we're going to share with you of the beautiful benefits that await those who understand. When the sunlight comes through the clouds, reflected on the ocean there, when the direct solar radiation is not blocked by clouds, it is experienced as sunshine. Notice that, direct solar radiation. A combination of bright light and radiant heat. When it is blocked by the clouds or reflects off of other objects, it is experienced as diffused light. Beautiful pictures. Makes me want to go sit on that park bench and just rest. Photosynthesis is a process that converts carbon dioxide. Get this. It converts carbon dioxide into organic compounds, especially sugars, using the energy from sunlight. Isn't that amazing? What light can do? The energy of the sunlight supports almost all life on Earth by photosynthesis and drives Earth's climate and atmosphere. Remember in the previous lecture when I shared with you about the leaves and all that wonderful chlorophyll and how the sunlight causes the chlorophyll to happen. It's really thick and green. The Earth is absolutely bathed in wonderful energy. So the Earth's climate drives the Earth's climate and atmosphere. Photosynthesis occurs in plants, algae, and many species of bacteria. Beautiful field. The existence of almost all life on Earth is fueled by light from the sun. I take a look at those wonderful vineyards just sweeping right across the coast of California there. The wonderful fruit trees and all the things that are dependent upon sunlight for growth. You know, we're dependent. All these things grow outside and they're flourishing and the animals are having a good time. Why is it that we're not doing so well? Have you thought about that? How come everything else needs the sunlight, but we got to, be careful, put on the SPF, so on and so forth. How come? What's going on? You're going to learn some stuff tonight that really help you to understand what's going on. So, when sunlight strikes the skin, it begins to produce vitamin D. A nice little young girl there in the field just having a good time in the sunlight. And it's so good for us. It really is. So I'm going to show you something really interesting here, and that is that vitamin D3 is produced in the skin of vertebrates after exposure to any light in the ultraviolet B wavelength, whether from the sun or artificial sources. And you notice up there the little purple insignia, the UVB. That's the frequencies right there that best benefit the human body. And you notice as you follow it down, you'll see 300 nm and so on and so forth. And you got UVB, UVA, UVC, your ultraviolet light that we cannot see. All that lighting spectrum is so important, but our benefit is in that UVB pale purple type range right there. That's the type we want to get on our skin. And even once this light penetrates your skin, it alters the composition of a skin compound called cutaneous 7-dehydrocholesterol. This alteration results in the creation of vitamin D3. Colorado State University reports that because vitamin D can be derived in this manner, as well as from outside sources, scientists do not consider it a true vitamin. That's because it doesn't come in something. It's made, it's created. Almost like a vitamin B12. Vitamin B12 is actually a bacteria that is made in the jejunum of the small intestine. It's synthesized by the human body, and it's made in your mouth overnight if you're a healthy person. It's a bacteria. If you brush your teeth in the morning, it's going to wipe out. Like if you brush your teeth before you have your meal, it's going to wipe out the bacteria. So you want to keep that in mind. Anyway, it's not considered a real vitamin by them, but that doesn't change its effect on the human body. The skin contains cholesterol known as 7-dehydroxycholesterol. When UVB light contacts the skin, some of the cholesterol converts to vitamin D3. D3 can also enter the blood through food supplements. You can buy these capsules that'll have vitamin D3, could be in 2000 IU, so on and so forth, different levels of input you can get. But it's actually a real blessing. Vitamin D also occurs naturally in a small range of foods. You know, as an example, sunflower seeds. Ounce for ounce, sunflower seeds have more vitamin D than fish oil. Not many people know that. Figure they got to get it from the fish oil. In some countries, staple foods such as milk, flour, and margarine are artificially fortified with vitamin D, and it is also available in supplement form. Light-exposed mushrooms may provide up to 100% of the recommended daily value of vitamin D. Isn't that amazing? Didn't know that before. I look at these portobellos and I just say, there's a sandwich waiting to happen. These things are fantastic. Right? If you season them right and you put the right oils, natural oils on them, sometimes they use sacha inchi oil or organic olive oil, and just flavor it up a little bit. Oh, it tastes so good to me. And it's so good for you. It really is. And so, another click, we got it. Vitamin D3 is transported to the liver where it is converted to calcidiol. That's from the skin. Once it enters the skin, it goes right to the liver. Isn't that interesting? There's the calcidiol molecule right up there. And the calcidiol molecule is sent from the liver to every organ and tissue in the body where it is converted into calcitriol, the active form of vitamin D. Now, vitamin D is carried in the bloodstream to the liver where it is converted into the prohormone calcidiol. Circulating calcidiol may then be converted into the biologically active form of vitamin D, either in the kidneys or in the immune system. When synthesized in the immune system, it acts locally, defending the body against microbial invaders. Isn't that, do you see what sunlight was meant to do for you? It's absolutely incredible. But now take a look at the kidneys, for instance. When it happens in the kidneys, rather fascinating. All the little nephrotic membranes just get so active. And when it's synthesized in the kidneys, it circulates as a hormone, regulating, among other things, the concentration of calcium and phosphate in the bloodstream, promoting the healthy mineralization, growth, and remodeling of bone, and the prevention of hypocalcemic tetany. That means intermittent muscular spasms. When anybody has aches, oh, my muscles are charley horsing, maybe it's just not enough sunlight happening. Not enough vitamin D3 taking place in the system. Now notice, it comes from the liver and it goes into the kidney and goes out to the kidney to the bones. Now what a fascinating system. My mind is boggled by it. And then it becomes super in the bones, making the bones thicker, stronger, with more calcium. Fascinating stuff, isn't it? Okay, Jeannie's going to come up and she's going to show you some scientific findings and sunlight.
Okay, so you've been learning lots of things about sunlight. I'm excited to share with you the research on sunlight, and I think by the time you hear what we have to share with you on that, you will all want to move to a different province, or at least to a different part of BC where you get more sunlight. I heard it rains a lot here, so. Scientific findings and sunlight. Let's take a look here and see what we have. If everyone in the US received enough sunshine, look at these statistics, you would have 200,000 less incidence of cancer per year, 63,000 less cancer deaths per year. Isn't that incredible? If we only would receive enough sunlight, that many cancers. This is just the US. We're going to see some world statistics here pretty soon. Adequate sun exposure worldwide could prevent 250,000 cases of colorectal cancer per year, 350,000 cases of breast cancer per year. That is incredible. Just amazing, just from sunlight, just from sun exposure. 14% of all deaths worldwide could be prevented each year if everyone on Earth received enough sunlight exposure. Amazing. 14% of all deaths. 30% of deaths from all cancers. Look at this, 75% fewer deaths from multiple sclerosis. That has been on the rise. And a lot of patients come to us with problems with MS. And look at that, 3/4 of all the cases of MS could be prevented with adequate sunlight. That's incredible. You may even have friends or know people that are struggling with MS, and this is something that you could recommend to them, is getting more sunlight exposure. 30% less deaths caused by diabetes, 10 to 25% fewer deaths from heart or vascular disease, 25% fewer deaths from tuberculosis, and 20 to 25% fewer deaths from respiratory disease. So look at how many different areas in the body are being affected by lack of sunlight. Just incredible. See if this is going to work for me here. Now, according to Zoltan Rona, he's a medical doctor, vitamin D deficiency and insufficiency play a role in causing 17 types of cancer. 17 different types of cancer, especially the breast, colon, and prostate, as well as autoimmune diseases like birth defects, chronic pain, depression, especially seasonal affective disorder, diabetes, both type 1 and type 2, fibromyalgia, heart disease, hypertension, MS, we talked about, muscle wasting, muscle weakness, obesity, osteoarthritis, osteoporosis, periodontal disease, and stroke. Isn't that something? That's from the research that he has come up with, and this is from, the source is Vitamin D, the Sunshine Vitamin. That's a book that he's authored. Researcher Dr. William Grant, he shows as well, he's proven that in America, increased sun exposure would result in 185,000 fewer cases of internal cancers every year and 30,000 fewer deaths, specifically cancer of breast, ovaries, colon, prostate, bladder, uterus, esophagus, rectum, and stomach. Just amazing. And again, this is coming from Dr. Hollick's book, UV Advantage. If you take a look at it, we have exchanged these surroundings, outdoors, if this little clicker is going to work for me tonight, for these surroundings. So we've changed from this to this. We've exchanged this workplace for this workplace here. Maybe we can just slide that forward a little bit here. We've exchanged this life. We've exchanged it for this life. And we've exchanged this job for this job. If you think about the exchanges that we have made, if you see how we've exchanged one type of workplace for another workplace, one type of a job for another job, you will see that we have an absence of sunlight that is taking place. We've moved from out of doors, indoors. And as we've moved indoors, we see all types of disease escalating. Diseases that were not that common when we were out of doors. We see all these things starting to take place. Now, I know there's going to be some questions happening in your mind, and we'll get to those questions. But for most people that are living at a latitude of roughly about 40 degrees north, I've heard some variation on it, even a little bit lower, in around 37 degrees. So at this latitude, 40 degrees north, we are not getting enough sunlight, most of us. And we have to do things to specifically make sure we're going to get the benefits. Now, while the sun is good, it is possible to overdo it and become sunburned instead of sun-tanned. So we can overdo. We do have to be careful. We have UVB, which Rudy mentioned, is the ultraviolet radiation that is specifically important for the production of vitamin D, and it will affect the upper layers of the skin. That will it's actually the radiation that causes burning. We have UVA though, which affects the lower layers, and that will cause problems like aging, wrinkling, things like that that people are concerned about. But we'll also see that that will damage those layers and will lead to cancers of the skin. And what happens is that UVB that burns, we want to put creams on a lot of times to prevent that from burning. And then what we do is we allow that UVA to actually penetrate deeper because we're not burning. Okay, so let's take a look here. Both the UVA and the UVB can cause both tanning and burning, although UVB does so more rapidly than UVA. UVA, however, penetrates the skin more deeply than UVB and can cause wrinkles and premature aging. UVB is the wavelength that stimulates the production of vitamin D in the skin. So that is the wavelength that we need. That's the necessary wavelength. Because UVB is also one of the wavelengths that causes sunburns, wearing sunscreen actually blocks your body's production of vitamin D. Look at this, a sunscreen of only 8 SPF will reduce your vitamin D production by 97.5%. Isn't that incredible? And a lot of people wear an SPF factor much higher than that. So an SPF 15 sunscreen will reduce it by 99.9%. Isn't that amazing? So we don't want to be wearing these sun protection factor creams, because they're preventing our bodies from producing that very important, necessary vitamin D. Sunscreen inhibits an enzyme in the skin which makes nitric acid, which one of its functions is to inflame the skin. Without reddening, more sun exposure is enjoyed, but this is damaging the skin and increasing the risk of skin cancer and premature aging, and you can see why that's taking place. If we're not burning, we will stay out there longer, won't we? And that allows then the UVA to penetrate deeper and cause these problems. Most sunscreen contains toxic chemicals, and we're going to look at some of those toxic chemicals. You're going to see what they do. The main chemical used to filter out UVB light, look at this, was found to kill mouse cells even at low doses. And ironically, it was shown to be particularly toxic when exposed to sunshine. Isn't that incredible? So we're putting on something to prevent burning from taking place, but the main chemical in this sunscreen is actually more toxic, particularly toxic when it's exposed to sunshine. And we're putting that on our bodies. And a lot of times we're putting that all over our little children. Now, sunscreens provide little free radical protection and protect only the outer layers of skin from burning, while leaving the inner layer vulnerable to damage. The inner layer is where melanoma is initiated. That's actually where it's initiated. Several studies make a case that UVA penetration allowed by sunscreens may lead to melanoma. And in fact, it's very interesting. I don't have the research up here to show you, but it's very interesting. If you take a look at the cases of melanoma, you will find that they are predominantly in areas not exposed to the sun and on people who are not out in the sun. Isn't that interesting? While we do have this problem happening from overexposure to the sun, where the UVA is penetrating and damaging those lower layers, that the more worrisome part for melanoma is when we are avoiding the sun. When we're actually inside and we're not getting that good vitamin D production, our risk of melanoma is increased. And most people think it's the other way around. Most of us are afraid to go out in the sun. We've been told we have to be careful, stay out of the sun, because we're increasing our risk of melanoma. But actually, you are increasing your risk greater by avoiding the sun, staying indoors. Isn't that interesting? Very interesting. But we need to do it safely, and I'm going to show you how we can be out in the sun safely, because obviously we don't want to overdo. We don't want to become burned. Sunscreens are less effective at preventing sunburns than conventional wisdom would imply, and studies show that they do not protect against melanoma. Sunscreens also facilitate the skin's absorption of pesticides. Isn't that something? So we're going to actually make our skin more susceptible for the absorption of pesticides. Let's take a look at some of the chemicals now that are found in sunscreen, a couple of them. The Environmental Working Group has compiled an interesting number of studies regarding the potential harm done by the chemicals in sunscreen. One of the key chemicals, oxybenzone, let's take a look at this one. The Center for Disease Control in 2008 released a study showing that 96.8% of Americans at age 6 are contaminated with oxybenzone, and that women were 3.5 times as likely to have high concentrations as men. The authors suggest that the greater use by women of personal care products, most of which contain sunscreens, is the reason for their higher degree of contamination. A remarkable 9% or more of the applied amount of oxybenzone used in 588 sunscreens and in 567 other personal care products is absorbed through the skin. So we are absorbing this toxic chemical in our bodies. Now, pregnant mothers exposed to oxybenzone gave birth to babies with low birth weights, which programs the developing child for greater risk of heart disease, hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and other diseases in adulthood. Furthermore, when exposed to sunlight, as it is in dominant use, the chemical becomes a potent allergen, isn't that something, and forms free radicals that disrupt cell function, leading to a number of diseases. So we're putting this sunscreen on with this very toxic chemical in there, which is becoming more toxic when exposed to the sun. It's supposed to be protecting us. That's just terrible. There's also gender-bending chemicals in sunscreens. Sunscreens have the potential gender-bending characteristics. They increase estrogen and decrease testosterone in men, and may be partly responsible for the nearly 50% reduction of sperm count in the last few decades. A 50% reduction, that's incredible. Sunscreen chemicals are known to cause the feminization of fish, and environmental pollution by these and similarly structured chemicals are now thought to cause feminization in alligators and the gradual extinction of Florida panthers due to failure to breed. Isn't that amazing what is taking place? A toxic chemical. We don't want this in our bodies. We certainly would not want to be putting it on our skin. Pesticide absorption, we mentioned that. Sunscreens also increase the absorption of pesticides through the skin. So we are making our bodies more susceptible to all of those toxins. Now here is a formula by Dr. Hollick. You may want to write this down. This formula will help you to be out in the sun safely. So this is his recommendations for a safe sun tanning formula. First of all, what you do is you estimate how long it will take in the particular conditions that you will be sunning yourself for you to get a mild sunburn. Okay? He calls that 1 med. It's known as 1 minimal erythritol dose, 1 med. Okay? So what you do at any particular time, you kind of would have an idea with the conditions that were outside. If it was a hot day, very sunny, no clouds, and you would know if you're fair skin, light skin, you all pretty well have an idea of how long you could be out there roughly before you would start to burn. So you would know, okay, boy, I better take a long sleeve shirt with me because it's going to be hot this afternoon, or you'd be thinking ahead like that. So what you do is you estimate how long it would take you in those particular conditions for you to get a sunburn. Okay, maybe it would take you 1 hour. You could be outside for 1 hour before you received a sunburn. Then, without applying sunscreen, so no sunscreen, you expose your hands, arms, face, whatever, for 25% the length of that time. Okay, so if it's 1 hour, if you figured in your mind, okay, I could be outside this afternoon for about 1 hour before I would start getting a little pink, starting to burn, then 25% of that length of time would be 15 minutes. So you're going to go out without any sunscreen, expose your skin for that length of time, 15 minutes, if that was what it was. That amount of sun exposure, this is what he says, that amount of sun exposure 2 or 3 days a week enables the body to make enough vitamin D to keep healthy. Okay? You don't need to be out there all afternoon or all day to make enough vitamin D to be healthy. It's just going to depend on what your one med would be for you particularly. Of course, skin tones are going to, or skin types I should say, are going to change how long it would take you to burn. If you had darker skin, maybe it would take you longer. Maybe someone who is fair skinned, they would burn in a much shorter time. So for that person, they may only need to be out there for 5 minutes. Maybe you would need to be out there for half an hour. Okay, so you'll be different depending on your skin type. He says that if you follow this guideline between May and October, you will make enough vitamin D to last you all winter. So in his research, he feels that you can actually make enough vitamin D to last all winter. Now, some other researchers feel that you may need to take a supplement through the winter months, but either way, if you follow this, you can still take yourself a supplement through the winter months, or we'll talk about some other ways too. Things that you can do just to ensure through those winter months that we get adequate vitamin D. Even without sunscreen, UVB light is not always strong enough to stimulate vitamin D production due to the time of year, time of day, pollution, and even weather conditions. So we mentioned time of year. For those of us that are living in the latitude that we're living at here, we are going to not be making very good vitamin D production through probably October, November into April, May. I don't know when your rain stops out here and you get some good sunlight, but whatever the months are that you're working with, you're going to have a particular time of the year for yourselves where vitamin D production will not be good because of the time of year. Time of day. UVB light is at its strongest between 10 and 2, the hours of 10 and 2. So ideally, we might want to get outside during those hours. If you're at work or something, maybe you can take your lunch and sit outside and just have 15, 20 minutes or something sitting in the sun getting your vitamin D. But that would be the best time to try to get out there to stimulate your production of vitamin D in your body. And of course, weather conditions, pollution, things like that are going to affect the amount of vitamin D that we're going to make from the UVB. Now, Ellen White had this to say. She said, "There are but few who realize that in order to enjoy health and cheerfulness, they must have an abundance of sunlight, pure air, and physical exercise." We talked about exercise on a previous lecture. You got to hear about that. But she's saying here, an abundance of sunlight. Isn't that something? So even back then, and that was 1871, she recognized how important that was. Now, this is a little bit of a lengthy article, but I really want to read this to you because I think you are going to find this extremely fascinating. What happens in the body? Why our bodies tan? Some people are so concerned. A tan, isn't that damaging the body if you get a tan? A tan is not damaging the body. You're going to see how your body is designed to change color and the reason why it works that way. So let's take a look here. Vitamin D is produced very slowly in dark-skinned people. Okay? Indeed, it's been shown that light skin produces vitamin D 6 times more efficiently than does dark skin. This slow rate of production in a dark-skinned person, however, does not create a health hazard in hot, sunny climates because exposure to sunlight is regular and lengthy, which is perfectly suited to dark skin's slow production. A small, constant production of vitamin D over a long period of time is as good as a large production in a short time. Hence, dark-skinned people who live in sunny climates produce adequate vitamin D for optimal health. In northern geographical areas, humans are exposed to less sunlight and in cold seasons must cover themselves with clothing. They can, therefore, produce vitamin D only when there is sufficient sunlight to stimulate its production in the skin, for example, only in the spring, summer, and fall. A paper by Dr. Nina Jablonski and Dr. George Chaplin demonstrates that skin pigmentation is predicted accurately by latitude. Isn't that interesting? With increasing latitudes correlating to lighter skin. There are only a few exceptions to this rule, one being the Eskimos who can obtain their vitamin D from fish. The farther north the latitude, the shorter is the season for receiving vitamin D producing sunlight. These northern people do not have the luxury of receiving ample direct sunlight year-round as do their neighbors to the south. They therefore need to produce sufficiently large quantities of vitamin D to supply their daily needs and in addition store a large quantity for the winter when the sun does not stimulate its production. These people have light skins so that they can produce more vitamin D when sunlight is available. Does that make sense to you? So you have light skin because we have a shorter time where we can be exposed to summer. So light skin, we're going to produce vitamin D more rapidly. Dark-skinned people who typically have lived at more southern latitudes, they have the luxury of long, sunny summers and into the winters, and so they can produce their vitamin D more slowly. Does that make sense to you with the skin types, okay? Let's carry on here. The rapid and large production of vitamin D in light-skinned people allows large quantities to be produced and stored during sunny seasons. During winter, those stores are depleted, and by spring, the body's supply of vitamin D is low and must be replenished. The sun begins to warm the earth, and people doff their winter clothing to receive the sun's rays. In early spring at these high latitudes, ultraviolet light, the UVB, is not available in the early morning and the temperature is too cool to shed warm clothing. However, toward midday when the UVB becomes available, the temperature warms and they begin to remove clothing, which exposes them to both the tanning rays and the vitamin D stimulating rays. See how this works? It's so incredible. Since the sun is weak in early spring, the people are not susceptible to burning. As the season progresses towards summer, the sun's rays become more direct and capable of causing sunburn. And tans form as a problem? No, to protect against that hazard. That's why the tan forms. It's not damaging the skin, it's actually protecting because you're going to receive less sun coming in, just like a dark-skinned person. Okay, they're not going to produce the vitamin D as rapidly. They have more protection there for their skin, and they produce it more slowly because they have that strong direct sunlight. That's exactly what happens in a lighter-skinned person as the summer gets hotter and hotter. Isn't that interesting how our bodies work? And I know a lot of people are concerned that, you know, a tan is actually damaging your skin. It's not. It's actually protecting. It's the way the body is working to protect it from too much exposure that could be harmful. So a tan is not a sign of injured skin as stated by those who promote sun avoidance. It is a sign of protected skin. Then as the sunlight subsides during the late summer and fall, the tan becomes lighter. So the skin soaks up as much UVB as possible in order to produce the maximum vitamin D achievable. As autumn comes, the early morning temperature cools and the clothing goes back on during early morning outdoor activity. However, at midday, the temperature becomes comfortable enough to remove warm clothes, thus ensuring that the people have the benefits of the diminishing amount of UVB. During this time of vitamin D production, the quantity produced above that needed for daily use would be stored for winter. This system is a cycle similar to that of the bees that produce honey and store it in order to live in the season when the flowers do not bloom. Isn't that so incredible how God has designed our bodies to operate? Dr. Grant points out, however, in the far north, vitamin D winter is several months long and storage is not sufficient to last until the return of vitamin D summer, so that's in the farther north. Dr. Grant points out that the half-life storage time for vitamin D is only 1 to 2 months, so it's necessary for people in the very far north, such as Inuit, to obtain a sustained source of vitamin D. So fascinating to me when I read that, and I thought how God has created our bodies to work. It's fascinating. I never understood really until I came across that research why our bodies tanned, what the reason was that our bodies tanned. But now I understand what is taking place in our system, how God has designed it to operate. Just fascinating. Now here's some research. This actually comes from Dr. Ernest Wellman. He's an MD. This was written back in 1875. I just want to share with you a key part of this. He stated that a tadpole, if deprived of sunlight, instead of progressing into a respectable frog, will remain a tadpole or degenerate into some monstrosity. Isn't that amazing? A tadpole cannot even complete its growth into a frog without adequate sunlight. Fascinating how important sunlight is. Now let's take a look at the physiological influence of light itself. Plants absorb carbon and give out oxygen or vital air in the light. But during the night, this process is reversed so that they absorb oxygen and give out carbon. Did you know that about plants? In the day, they're taking in all the carbon dioxide that we're giving off, and they're giving off oxygen, which we need. But at nighttime, they actually reverse that process and they start taking in oxygen and giving off carbon dioxide. Very fascinating. The nutritive process is materially checked in all vegetables and animals when they're deprived of light for a considerable time. That means the production of nutrients in that plant. So if you had a plant in your garden that you were restricting the light from having access to that plant, okay, it's going to check, it's going to hold that in check. Those nutrients are not going to develop like they should be. In this case, vegetables are said to become etoliated, and that's basically they become pale. It's a condition analogous to that called anemia or hyperanemia. In man, a state of bloodlessness and inanition. In some of the lower animals, the process of metamorphosis is arrested by deprivation of the solar influence, and that's what we just looked at. A tadpole does not actually continue its growth into a frog when it's deprived of the sunlight. So very important. The operation of light on the animal organism has always been recognized as urging to exercise. That means when we get light, it actually makes us feel more energetic. It energizes us. That's the physiological influence of light on us as human beings. And increasing the activity of both the bodily and mental powers, so not just physically but mentally as well. Light stimulates your brain to be more mentally alert, more mentally active, while its absence or privation disposes to indolence and obesity. Fascinating. Animals are more readily fattened when kept in obscurity because the diminished activity of the depurating, that's the purifying functions, favors the accumulation of adipose matter. Isn't that interesting? So animals are more readily fattened when they're kept out of the light because the diminished activity of the purifying functions in the body favors the accumulation of adipose matter. That means your body is not going to work to detoxify as it should be doing. So what they've shown in animals, that animals will actually gain weight. They'll get fat by being out of the light, out of the sunlight. They'll have problems with obesity. Very, very interesting. Poultry are often confined in dark places to augment their store of oil, and heads of geese and turkeys are sometimes covered by a hood or their eyes put out in order to procure from them, fat and greasy livers as choice morsels for depraved epicures. This is coming from Herbert Shelton. These facts show us that light and an abundant supply of it is indispensable to a due development of all organized bodies. Very fascinating. We need to be out in the light, not just to prevent cancer, not just to prevent MS or respiratory diseases or any of the other list of diseases, but it actually helps us to maintain a proper body weight. And that is so important because in North America and actually around the world, obesity rates are climbing. And just being out in the sun can help improve that in our bodies. It will make us actually more active as well. Okay, other benefits of sunlight. Let's run through a list here. Improves digestion and assimilation, improves calcium absorption, helps prevent heart disease and stroke. Isn't that interesting? It improves the calcium absorption. For anyone that may have problems with bone density, not strong enough bones, Sunlight, being out in the sun, is going to help improve that absorption and help with your bones. Improves muscle tone, strength, and size. Again, that's been shown when invalids are taken out of doors and placed in the sunlight. Muscle mass increases just from being placed in the sunlight. Helps prevent type 1 diabetes, improves the health of the skin, helps prevent rheumatoid arthritis, enhances embryo development, improves the quality and quantity of mother's milk, improves sleep, lowers blood pressure, raises energy levels, relieves depression. Wow, all of the benefits of sunlight. Isn't that wonderful, what God has given to us? More benefits of sunlight. We won't read through all the references, but it maintains healthy bones, restricts the growth of tuberculosis within cells. Look at this, effective against anthrax. Interesting, against anthrax, cholera, E. coli, dysentery, influenza, staphylococcus, streptococcus, and other illnesses. Prevents the autoimmune reaction that leads to IBS, inflammatory bowel disease. Interesting. It helps to prevent and alleviate the symptoms of MS. We talked about, lowers cholesterol. Obesity, we talked about, according to Dr. Mercola, a strong connection has recently been found between obesity and a deficiency in vitamin D. May help to prevent Parkinson's, schizophrenia, Alzheimer's, rebalances the chemical disruptions that cause polycystic ovary syndrome and PMS, helps to prevent muscular atrophy, improves athletic performance. All of the benefits of sunlight, it's amazing. Has a powerful effect on skin disorders such as psoriasis and eczema, and it lessens tooth decay. Powerful. Now, we're going to see how fat factors in our diet, how that factors into what happens when we're out in the sun. Now, eating a healthy diet is a little known but extremely important way to prevent skin cancer. A lot of times you're told stay out of the sun to prevent skin cancer, but did you know that eating a healthy diet is probably more important than your length of time out in the sun? Well, of course, we don't want to get a burn, but if you're eating an unhealthy diet, even being out in the sun, period, you are risking an increase in skin cancer. A 1995 study published in the International Journal of Cancer reported that people who ate a low-fat diet had 90% less chance of getting skin cancer. That's huge, 90% less. Conversely, a diet high in fat shortens the time between UV exposure and the onset of cancer and increases the number of tumors that develop. Did you get that? So a high-fat diet is actually going to shorten the time between the UV exposure and the onset of cancer. That means there's going to be a shorter time before that skin cancer develops, and it's going to increase the number of tumors that develop. How important that we are very careful with the quantity of fat coming in, but you'll also see the type of fat is also very, very important. According to the same article, the magnitude of the dietary effect is almost directly related to the amount and kind of fat consumed, and of course saturated fat appears to be related to skin cancer. The use of natural whole foods builds healthy cells and an active immune system and provides the right kind of fatty acids in the skin to react properly with sunlight. You would remember from a previous presentation that we did when we talked about the reasons why we eat foods, and one is for fatty acids, and Rudy showed you the difference between whole foods and processed foods or denatured foods. One has fatty acids, one has fats. Big difference. A carrot has wonderful, healthful fatty acids. And for those of you who have ever juiced carrots through your juicer and you see that lovely orange that doesn't want to wash off of there, that is from the oils in the carrot. That is good oil, good fat for our body. But if we denature our foods, if we do things like frying, deep frying for sure, or using nutritional oils for heating, we actually then end up with toxic fats coming into our bodies. Sunlight is only beneficial when these conditions exist, when we have healthy cells from good fatty acids coming in. On the other hand, if there are free radicals and the wrong kind of cholesterol in the skin from consuming highly processed foods and the immune system is depressed, exposure to sunlight is damaging and may cause skin cancer. These are some pictures actually of non-melanoma skin cancers. It's very sad what happens in the body. But in 1930, researchers demonstrated that the consumption of butter greatly accelerated the development of skin cancers in mice who were treated with a carcinogenic tar. Just the consumption of butter greatly accelerated those skin cancers to develop. In 1939, researchers exposed 5 groups of albino mice to intense radiation with ultraviolet light for 1 hour daily and then fed each group a different diet. Cancerous tumors were produced most rapidly on a diet high in hydrogenated fats. That also includes partially hydrogenated fats. So read your labels carefully. Okay, very, very important. Dr. Homer Black and his colleagues at Baylor University found that a high level of dietary fat markedly shortened the time between UV exposure and tumor appearance and increased the number of tumors that developed, which is what we just read earlier. Later, in 1995 and 1998, Dr. Black performed 2 studies which showed that subjects placed on a low-fat diet, that's 21% of their calories from fat, which we actually recommend a little lower than that, but this is what they did for their research. 21% of calories from fat were 94% less likely to develop skin cancer at all. So you can see the high-fat diets, and especially what we have here in North America, these very high-fat diets, are directly contributing to skin cancer, the incidence of skin cancer, and we have seen that certainly increase. Okay, let's look. Dr. Mark Sorensen, he talked about lipid peroxidation. That's where your fats are actually oxidizing, causing free radicals to happen. This occurs during the heating and processing of oils, and it produces free radical atoms by the quadrillions. Isn't that amazing? Free radicals by the quadrillions. He then asked the question, can you imagine the harm done by consuming vegetable oils heated repeatedly in deep fat fryers to cook French fries? You know, a lot of times vegan vegetarians come to us and they say, well, I'm a vegan vegetarian, but I'm sick. And they have legitimate health problems happening. But as we analyze what the foods are that they're consuming, they may go to McDonald's or KFC or something and buy these deep-fried, French-fried potatoes. We're going to talk more about those potatoes when we get to our topic on genetically modified foods. You'll learn more about that. But they're consuming these, but look at what's happening and how this can be directly contributing. You can be a vegan vegetarian and still be putting very unhealthy foods into your body. Potatoes, if they are deep fried, and especially if they're being deep fried in these fats that are being constantly reheated, imagine the damage that is taking place in your body, the free radicals, the quantities of free radicals coming in. The cigarette, this is what he says, and I find this so appropriate. The cigarette has been properly labeled a cancer stick. And that appellation, he says, may also be appropriately applied to the deadly French fry. In addition to plugging arteries, these oils find their way into the skin where the sunlight further damages them. It is no wonder, he says, that in Dr. Black's research, which we just took a look at, lowering the fat content to 21% of calories lowered the incidence of skin cancer by as much as 94% because these very toxic oils were not now coming into the body. But isn't that something? That's the cancer stick. The French fry can have the same name given it. Omega-6 fats such as corn oil and other commercial vegetable oils seem to be the most carcinogenic, and omega-3 fats such as those contained in flax oil, hemp seed, walnuts, and dark green leaves inhibit the formation of skin cancer. Very interesting. So your corn oil, your other commercial vegetable oils, which a lot of times, by the way, those oils that say just vegetable oil, they do contain cottonseed oil. And we're going to look again when we get to our topic on genetically modified foods. You're going to see how that is something that is highly genetically modified. So, you know, there's other health concerns as well that you need to be aware of there. But those seem to be the most carcinogenic. Very, very interesting. The primary dietary method of protecting against skin cancer is to lower the toxic fat content of the diet. If a person insists on eating toxic fats, the skin will be damaged by sunlight. So we need to be very careful. Now let's take a look at melanoma. A review of all research on sunlight and melanoma up to 1997 showed that burning at any age increased melanoma risk 70 to 90%. That's a big risk, big increase in the risk of melanoma. And probably many of us here have received a sunburn at some point in our lives. I know I have, okay? So they're saying, you know, that this is actually going to increase your risk of melanoma. However, a recent study of the correlation between dietary habits and melanoma showed that individuals with the lowest intake of alpha carotene, beta carotene, cryptoxanthin, lutein, lycopene, these are all carotenoid antioxidants, had a 50% increased risk for melanoma. So if you're not consuming these wonderful foods that contain all of these carotenoids, you're increasing your risk 50% right there. Now, if you're consuming all of these, you're going to lower that risk. Even though you may have had a sunburn at some point in your life, put these wonderful foods in, these wonderful carotenoids into your body to help give you that added protection against melanoma. But isn't that something? By not consuming those foods, and if we look at the diet that a lot of people in North America, most people in North America are consuming, they are missing out on these wonderful foods. Most people are not eating vegetables. You would be surprised. Vegetables, very little consumption. People come into our office. Some people have a can of this vegetable or a can of that vegetable occasionally. You know, they're not getting the vegetables. And we talked to you about what happens when you heat the food. So canning those foods, you know, you've lost enzymes and nutrients that have been destroyed. So people are missing out on this most important nutrients that will help protect against these diseases that we've been talking about, and specifically with melanoma. Look at this. Those who consumed the most alcohol had a 65% increased risk of melanoma. And again, that's something, we have many patients that come to our office and ask us, well, what about a glass of wine with our meal? Is that not okay? But again, alcohol is a contributor to melanoma. Another study indicated a 2.5 times increased risk for melanoma among those who consume 2 or more alcoholic drinks per day. Melanoma and non-melanoma skin cancer are to a great extent preventable by what? Good lifestyle choices. So we can actually prevent these deadly cancers by good lifestyle choices. Lifestyle trends during the past 100 years are partially responsible for the increase in skin and many other cancers. And these trends include, and you will probably notice these trends in maybe your own habits or those friends of yours, decrease in green, vegetable, and colorful fruit consumption. That's one reason that Rudy and I promote green smoothies so strongly, because people are not eating their greens. There has been a decrease in the consumption of greens. The increased exposure to chemicals, we're all we all have an increased exposure. The proliferation of prescription drugs. We see little children coming into our office and they're already on handfuls of prescription drugs, and it breaks my heart because there is not one drug out there that's going to heal the human body, not one. And every drug, even a baby aspirin, is toxic to your body. Now, there may be a time and a place where a prescription medication is necessary for a short-term intervention while you are changing whatever caused the underlying problem in your body. But that drug, I don't care what drug it is, will never ever heal your body. And these children are starting on these drugs at these early ages, and they're getting used to that kind of a mentality. You know, I have this ache, I got to take this pill. You know, they start thinking this mentality, and it breaks my heart to see that. The obesity pandemic, it's a pandemic. We have a real problem with obesity. The consumption of fast foods. When you go back, you know, even 50 years back, the consumption of fast foods was nothing like it is today. People eat now 3 times a day fast foods. That's what they're consuming. And increased sedentary living. We talked about that when we talked about our exercise program. We are becoming a very sedentary society. And decreased sunlight exposure. We've moved from outdoors to indoors. Everything is inside, indoors. And if we do go outside, we make sure to put all that sunscreen on and cover ourselves up with all these poisonous chemicals. Isn't that terrible? So the change from outdoor agrarian living to indoor correlates to the spectacular increase in skin cancer. Now, what about sun tanning beds? Are they beneficial? People ask us about sun tanning beds. Is that something good that you can do? Well, here's some of the benefits of using tanning beds. According to Mark Sorensen, every beneficial effect of vitamin D that is produced by sunlight exposure is also produced by the use of high-quality tanning beds. I want to stress high quality. There are lower quality tanning beds which give off a lot of UVA, but the high-quality tanning beds, he is stating that you can get every benefit through the use of those beds that you can with the exposure to sunlight. So that's maybe good news for some people. Tanning bed use dramatically increases the serum vitamin D levels and bone mass. Tanning bed use increases vitamin D levels by 150% in only 7 weeks. So again, you know, a high-quality tanning bed may be something that could work for you. Tanning bed use reduces chronic pain. High-quality tanning beds can provide up to 10,000 IU of vitamin D in less than 10 minutes. And 10,000 IU is roughly about what they feel that the body will produce if you go out at 1 med. We talked about that earlier, Dr. Hollick, what he recommended that your sun exposure be. That if you're outside in that time, that you would be producing about 10,000 IU of vitamin D. So they feel that that is a very safe amount of vitamin D, and we're going to look at the toxicity, if there is a toxicity problem to be concerned about. But you can actually produce that amount of vitamin D in less than 10 minutes. That's pretty incredible. Now, what about full spectrum lights? You know, people have asked about full spectrum lights. Is that something that can be beneficial? Well, full spectrum lights are lights that include the full spectrum of color, as well as infrared and ultraviolet wavelengths. Sunlight is in this category, as are some special artificial lights. And one of the many reasons that full spectrum light is necessary is because of its effect on the balance of neurochemicals in your brain. Full spectrum lights can be very beneficial if you are prone to seasonal affective disorder. So if you have struggles with when the weather turns gray and we have less sunlight and it's colder and we can't get outside, or maybe it's raining and you don't have the sunlight and you find that that's bringing a depressive sort of a mood to you, full spectrum lights can be very beneficial. You can put them on your desk. You can have a desk lamp there, maybe where you're sitting to do some study or something. If you wear glasses, slip your glasses off for a period of time and let that light just enter in through your eyes. It can be very beneficial and help to relieve the depression that a lot of people feel with that. Now, what about vitamin D toxicity? Let's take a look here. This is Dr. Reinhold Weiss, not to be confused with Dr. Walter Weiss. He states this, that daily brief subarrhythmal, arrhythma is sunburn, and subarrhythmal means therefore before sunburning, so subarrhythmal, that's before you would sunburn. So daily brief exposure of a substantial area of the skin to ultraviolet light, climate allowing, provides adults with a safe physiologic amount of vitamin D equivalent to an oral intake of about 10,000 IU of vitamin D3 per day. So he's saying that if you have that brief exposure to sunlight, you are going to produce this, from the ultraviolet light, you're going to produce vitamin D in the equivalent of what you would take in an oral uptake or intake of 10,000 IU vitamin D3 a day. So that amount of D3 they have found not to have any problem. Evidence from clinical trials show with a wide margin of confidence that a prolonged intake of 10,000 IU of vitamin D3 per day poses no risk of adverse effects for adults, even if this is added to a rather high physiologic background of vitamin D. That means even if you're out in the sun and producing vitamin D out in the sun, they still have not found any problem with taking 10,000 IU of vitamin D3 a day. Very interesting. I've seen research which was done on individuals with breast cancer, very aggressive breast cancers, where they were taking 50, 60, 70,000 IU of vitamin D3 a day, and those cancers disappeared. Now, I'm not going to recommend anyone to do that, and I'm going to make that very, very clear. I'm not going to recommend that you do that without being under a doctor's supervision. Simply because what you need to do is get your vitamin D levels checked regularly when you're taking that amount of vitamin D into your body. But I just found that very interesting research. So it shows that our bodies can take in a lot of this vitamin D. I would not recommend those high doses for lengths of time. But you can work with your medical doctor. You would have to have prescription to be getting that amount of vitamin D. But you can work with your medical doctor and have them monitor your vitamin D levels. What the test is that you ask for is called a 25 hydroxy vitamin D3 test. Okay? 25 hydroxy vitamin D3 test. That's the test that you actually ask for. And they can test and monitor just to make sure that you're staying in a good range for your body. And what you are wanting to get is a range between about 55 to 65. That will be the range that you're looking for. So you'll ask them for that information. Now, carrying on with the vitamin D toxicity, in 1999, Dr. Vyth indirectly asked the medical community to produce any evidence at all that 10,000 IU of vitamin D a day was toxic, saying, "Throughout my preparation of this review, I was amazed at the lack of evidence supporting statements about the toxicity of moderate doses of vitamin D." And he added that if there is published evidence of this toxicity in adults from an intake of 10,000 IU per day, and that is verified by, that's the 25 hydroxy D concentration, he says, I have yet to find it. So he's looked at the research. He cannot find any toxicity at that level of 10,000 IU a day. Does anyone know what's recommended, what the recommended daily amount is?
2,000.
Well, that's been adjusted recently. Do you know what it was, though, for a long time? 400 IU a day. Then they bumped it maybe 800 IU a day. Isn't that amazing? Those amounts are not enough to give us what we need, the amount of vitamin D that we're needing, especially those of us living at this latitude and we are not able to get the sunlight through a good portion of the year. Okay, he carries on with the vitamin D toxicity, but I just want to show you here when they looked at the excess of it, he's stating that you would have to take the equivalent, it'd be the equivalent of a 110-pound adult taking 176 million IU, or that would be 440,000 of those 400 unit D3 capsules a day. That's what he's stating you would pretty much have to take before you started getting to some very toxic effects in the body. Okay, so most of us are probably not going to do that. But again, I just want to state that if you plan on taking high-dose vitamin D for any reason, anything above 10,000 IU, I would recommend that you just keep those vitamin D levels monitored through your medical doctor through that 25 hydroxy vitamin D test. Okay, that's the test that you'll ask them for. Okay. So Vyth reports human toxicity probably begins to occur after chronic daily consumption. So chronic, that means every single day, of approximately 40,000 IU a day. That would be 100 of those 400 IU capsules. Heavy sun exposure when combined with excessive supplement use is a theoretical risk for vitamin D toxicity. But he says if such a case has been reported, I'm not aware of it. So he's saying there is a theoretical risk there, but he has not been made aware of any reported case of toxicity. I would state, though, everything in moderation. Okay? Here's some miscellaneous quotes on vitamin D that I thought would be very interesting for you to see. Dr. Hollick, who is known as a vitamin D expert, almost the vitamin D expert in fact, he says that when you ingest vitamin D, only about 60% of it sticks to vitamin D binding protein. But when you make vitamin D in your skin, 100% binds to the protein. So much better than if we have the opportunity, better to get out in the sun and make our vitamin D. That's always better than a supplement. Dr. Michael Eads says the danger of too much sun is minimal, but the danger of too little sun is enormous. And I think you've seen that with some of these statistics that we've seen. It's enormous. Dr. Richard Honecker says, I would recommend that every patient, every person in America get their vitamin D checked because so many people are low and the ramifications of having low vitamin D are so severe. John Mayer, Dr. John Mayer says, natural sunlight's benefits are not limited to vitamin D production. As light enters the eyes, photoreceptors convert the light into nerve impulses that travel along the optic nerve to the brain. These impulses trigger the hypothalamus gland to send neurotransmitters to regulate the automatic functions of the body, such as blood pressure, body temperature, respiration, digestion, sexual function, moods, immune and hormonal modulation, and circadian rhythm. Isn't that interesting how that works, how sunlight works? It's important. Dennis Mangan says this is like the holy grail of cancer medicine. Vitamin D produced a drop in cancer rates greater than that for quitting smoking or indeed any other countermeasure in existence. So fascinating. He's saying that there is nothing out there that has been recommended, nothing, quitting smoking, quitting drinking, any of these countermeasures to prevent cancer, nothing produced such a drop in cancer rates as the vitamin D production. So important that we get out in the sunlight. Hippocrates had this to say, whoever wishes to investigate medicine properly should proceed thus. In the first place, to consider the seasons of the year. And I believe that to be so important, so very, very important. Exercise and a free, abundant use of the air and sunlight would give life and strength to the emaciated. Comes from Healthful Living, page 230. The feeble one should press out into the sunshine as earnestly and naturally as do the shaded plants and vines. The pale and sickly grain blade that has struggled up out of the cold of early spring puts out the natural and healthy deep green after enjoying for a few days the health and life-giving rays of the sun. Go out into the light and warmth of the glorious sun, you pale and sickly ones, and share with vegetation its life-giving, health-dealing power. Isn't that something? Go out in the sunlight. Perfect cleanliness, plenty of sunlight, careful attention to sanitation and every detail of the home life are essential to freedom from disease and to the cheerfulness and vigor of the inmates of the home. Such important information. Exercise and a free and abundant use of the air and sunlight would give life and strength to the emaciated. These are all, this is all information that was given to God's people back many, many years ago. And Ellen White saw the very needed importance of being out in the sun, out in the fresh air. We have another presentation that we don't have together to give you this time, but it will be in an upcoming presentation that we'll be doing in the future. And it's all about the importance of fresh air. Fresh air, how important. But she saw how important these things are to go out and enjoy the nature, what God's given us. Truly, the light is sweet, and a pleasant thing it is for the eyes to behold the sun. That comes from Ecclesiastes 11, verse 7. I hope you have been blessed, that you have learned some interesting facts about the sun, that you won't be fearful to go outside and enjoy the wonderful sunlight that God's given us. Go out, make that vitamin D, leave off those toxic sunscreens and chemicals, and enjoy what God has given to be a blessing to you. Thank you.